Crisis alert in Baku. The People's Republic of China has suspended all imports of natural gas from Azerbaijan. The decision, officially announced on September 4th at 2:30 in the afternoon, was communicated directly to the Ministry of Energy in Baku. The official reason: technical discrepancies in the quality of the exported fuel. But behind this bureaucratic explanation lies an impact that threatens the very economic stability of the Republic. According to the BP Statistical Review of World Energy 2023, Beijing had been purchasing around 8 billion cubic meters of Azerbaijani gas per year, the equivalent of 22% of all national energy exports, generating more than $4 billion annually. With a single notification, this vital source of foreign currency was cut off. What seemed like a simple contractual adjustment turned into an unprecedented crisis. 7 days before the announcement, a delegation of 20 Chinese technicians arrived at the Sangachal terminal, Azerbaijan's largest gas processing hub. Officially, it was meant to be a routine audit, but eyewitnesses reported an unusual climate of tension. Parallel measurements were taken at 7 different points along the transportation system, using the team's own equipment. The results were never shared with local engineers. Then suddenly came the accusation. Hydrogen sulfide concentration was allegedly 0.73% above the contractual limit. Experts from the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies disputed this claim, noting that variations of this scale do not compromise industrial use and are usually corrected with simple technical adjustments. President Ilham Aliyev responded by calling an emergency meeting with Energy Minister Parviz Shabazov, SOCAR Chief Rovnag Abdullayev, and Minister of Economic Development Mikhail Jabarov. The dilemma was evident. Was this truly a technical issue, or a carefully calculated strategic move by Beijing? The collapse of 1/5 of exports in a single day exposed the vulnerability of a dependent economy. But what worried officials even more was the question now echoing through Baku's corridors. If China has decided to shut off the tap, who might be next to follow the same path? The immediate domino effect. The consequences came swiftly. Less than 24 hours after China's announcement, the Azerbaijani manat suffered its sharpest depreciation in the past 5 years. The currency lost more than 6% against the dollar, according to data from the Central Bank of Azerbaijan. In an attempt to contain the collapse, the institution intervened by injecting $120 million from foreign exchange reserves. Yet the fall was inevitable. That same day, the Baku Stock Exchange temporarily suspended trading after a massive sell-off in the energy sector. Companies such as the Azeri Chirag Gunishli Consortium lost up to 18.5% of their market value in just 2 hours. In total, the energy sector contracted by $750 million, according to Bloomberg estimates. For a country where energy accounts for 40% of foreign currency revenues, every percentage point lost translates into a direct blow to the public budget. The impact quickly reached ordinary citizens. In Baku, shopkeepers reported immediate price hikes on imported goods, reflecting fears of a dollar shortage in the market. For the average household, this meant seeing wages lose purchasing power almost overnight. This type of crisis is not confined to economic charts. It reaches the dinner table and everyday life. International insurers moved fast. British giant Lloyd's reclassified Azerbaijan's energy projects as high commercial risk, raising insurance costs for shipments to Asian markets by 50%. This meant that even if an agreement were struck, simply exporting became more expensive and complicated. Analysts at the International Crisis Group highlighted an alarming point. The speed of the financial system's reaction suggested that investors had already anticipated a drastic Chinese decision. This raises an uncomfortable question. Had the erosion of trust begun even before the official announcement? This is the domino effect of great powers. A single notification from Beijing turned into panic in financial markets, inflation in daily life, and social instability. What lies ahead may be even more serious, and we will examine it in the next chapter. The geopolitical game behind China's technical justification lies a far larger dispute: the strategic control of Caspian energy. Beijing's decision coincided with a bold move by Azerbaijan. In recent weeks, Baku increased its gas exports to Europe by 30%, according to data from the International Energy Agency. This growth occurred through the Southern Gas Corridor, the system that links Azerbaijan to Turkey, and from there to the heart of the European continent. The most ambitious plan was still on the horizon: the expansion of the Trans-Anatolian Pipeline, which could rise from 16 to 31 billion cubic meters per year. Such a leap would reduce Azerbaijan's dependence on Asia and strengthen ties with Brussels. For Beijing, this project was not just a detail. It was a red alert. Was Baku turning its back on the Chinese market to align definitively with the West? Here lies an intriguing paradox. China claims it cannot tolerate even minimal deviations in gas quality. Yet according to the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, Turkmen gas, which makes up the majority of Chinese imports, contains similar impurities. Why then does Ashgabat continue exporting without restrictions, while Baku was punished with an abrupt cutoff? International policy experts, including those at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, suggest that Beijing is using quality as a pretext to pressure Baku. The goal appears straightforward: to prevent Azerbaijan from drawing too close to the European Union. In other words, the technical decision conceals a political message. But can Baku withstand such a high-stakes game? The Republic seeks diversification, yet still relies on external markets to keep its balance of payments stable. Each step toward Europe risks being interpreted as provocation by Beijing, and every Chinese retaliation places the nation's energy security in jeopardy. The question hanging in the air is clear: how far can a small Caucasus state go in challenging the interests of two global giants at the same time? Diplomacy inflames China's announcement was followed by an immediate reaction in Baku. Just 2 hours after receiving the notification, President Ilham Aliyev convened an emergency meeting with top ministers and SOCAR executives. It was evident that this was no longer just a technical disagreement. It was a diplomatic earthquake. Energy Minister Parviz Shahbazov tried to calm tensions. In a speech to Parliament, he promised to invest $250 million in upgrading gas purification equipment and to bring in independent international experts to certify product quality. But his words, broadcast by Trend News Agency, carried a revealing tone. Shahbazov lamented the absence of prior consultations with Beijing before the decision. It was a restrained criticism, yet it clearly signaled the strain between the two countries. Meanwhile, Brussels was watching with interest. According to the International Energy Agency, the European Union increased its imports of Azerbaijani gas by 30% in 2023. The possibility of further expansion seemed tempting, especially as Europe seeks to reduce dependence on the Russian Federation. But one obstacle loomed: infrastructure. The Trans-Anatolian pipeline is already operating at 80% capacity, and doubling its throughput would require at least $2.5 billion in investment and 3 years of construction. Time was not on Baku's side. On the regional chessboard, Turkey adopted a calculated posture. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan phoned Ilham Aliyev, offering himself as mediator. After all, every cubic meter that flows through pipelines crossing Turkish territory brings revenue and transit fees. Yet Ankara also maintains a billion-dollar trade relationship with China, more than $28 billion in 2024, according to the Turkish Statistical Institute. How far would Turkey be willing to go? And then there was the Russian Federation. Analysts at the Russian International Affairs Council noted that Moscow could offer purification technology and even alternative routes for Azerbaijani gas. But any rapprochement carried a price: greater political dependence. Would Baku be willing to trade one problem with Beijing for another with Moscow? What began in laboratories and pipelines was quickly morphing into a diplomatic contest where every move could redefine historical alliances. But amid so much external pressure, another question began to grow inside Azerbaijan itself. How long could the population endure the costs of this crisis? The social price of the crisis. The energy crisis ceased to be just a diplomatic dispute and began to be felt in the streets of Azerbaijan. In Baku's neighborhoods, families reported an immediate increase in the prices of imported goods, a direct result of the manat's devaluation. According to the Central Bank of Azerbaijan, in just 2 days, citizens withdrew more than $400 million in deposits, equal to 7% of all foreign currency reserves in the banking system. Fear of instability turned lines at ATMs into scenes of collective anxiety. The social impact went beyond purchasing power. The energy sector, which accounts for 40% of the country's foreign currency revenues, began preparing staff cuts. Internal estimates from the Azerbaijan Trade Unions Confederation indicated that more than 8,000 direct jobs were at risk. In industrial cities such as Sumgait, where major processing plants are concentrated, entire families depend on employment from state-owned and subcontracted companies. The threat of mass layoffs brought the word strike back into union meetings. Unions demanded formal government guarantees to preserve wages and jobs. Confederation President Sattar Mehbaliev even declared that without concrete measures, walkouts would take place. Here, the macroeconomic crisis gained a human face: anxious workers, weakened communities, and a government under pressure from all sides. In parliament, the opposition seized the moment to demand accountability. Rif Hajeli, leader of the Musavat Party, accused the government of excessive dependence on the Chinese market and called for the resignation of the energy minister. Other lawmakers went further, suggesting a review of all long-term contracts and the creation of strategic gas reserves to safeguard energy sovereignty. But how realistic were such radical proposals in the face of a sudden collapse in revenue? This raised a deeper reflection. What if the crisis was not temporary? What happens when the backbone of an economy, responsible for nearly 1/3 of the public budget, begins to fail? The risk was not only recession, but prolonged social instability. This is the true weight of the conflict, not only in broken contracts or diplomatic disputes, but in the daily lives of people fearing they might lose their jobs tomorrow. And a new shadow began to loom. If China paved the way to challenge the quality of Azerbaijani gas, would other buyers follow suit? The risk of a cascade effect. If the rupture with China was already devastating, what truly frightened Baku was the possibility of a domino effect. And the signs began to appear almost immediately. Italian company Eni dispatched a technical commission to assess the quality of Azerbaijani gas. British giant BP did the same, launching an emergency audit in Baku. Even Greek firm DEFA announced additional tests, accelerated to be completed in just 5 business days, an unusually short deadline that raised suspicions. Experts from the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies warned, if Chinese complaints were confirmed by independent auditors, other buyers might adopt similar measures. In that scenario, Azerbaijan would not only lose the Chinese market, but also much of its European contracts. The impact would be catastrophic. The country could forgo up to $6 billion annually, more than 1/3 of all export revenues, according to the World Bank. This risk exposed a structural weakness, near total dependence on a single sector. Oil and gas account for roughly 40% of foreign currency revenues and 28% of the government budget, according to International Monetary Fund data. Any prolonged disruption undermines the ability to finance social programs, infrastructure, and even political stability. In the midst of the tension, a dilemma emerged. Should Azerbaijan negotiate aggressive discounts to regain importers' confidence or launch international legal disputes? The government even considered offering 10 to 15% price cuts, which would mean additional losses of between $400 and $600 million per year. But what would be the cost of setting such a precedent? If China managed to impose unilateral conditions, other partners could demand the same. This crossroads made clear that the problem was not only economic, but strategic. Could Azerbaijan sustain its international credibility under so much suspicion? Meanwhile, every audit, every technical report, and every closed-door meeting in European capitals fueled an even greater suspense. Who would be the next to doubt Azerbaijani gas? Between submission and resistance. At the height of the crisis, Baku faced an existential dilemma: yield to China's demands or risk a prolonged confrontation in international courts. Both options carried heavy costs. On one side, offering discounts of 10 to 15% on gas prices would mean annual losses of up to $600 million, according to local energy consultants. On the other, pursuing international arbitration could take years, while the economy would bleed day by day. Pressure did not come from Beijing alone. Turkmenistan was moving to fill the gap left by Azerbaijan in the Chinese market. President Serdar Berdimuhamedov opened negotiations with state-owned CNPC to increase Turkmen supply, as reported by China Daily. Moscow also saw an opportunity. The Russian International Affairs Council noted that Gazprom could provide purification technology and alternative routes, but only in exchange for long-term political commitments. Meanwhile, Brussels, though interested in expanding Azerbaijani gas purchases, admitted that infrastructure limits made an immediate leap impossible. Expanding the Trans-Anatolian pipeline would require at least 3 years and $2.5 billion in investments, according to the International Energy Agency. Domestically, the situation was even more delicate. The loss of confidence was reflected in the sovereign credit rating. Moody's placed Azerbaijan under review for a downgrade, citing fiscal deterioration and the risk of rising debt. Standard & Poor's added the country to its negative watch list, warning that instability could increase the cost of international borrowing. Yet amid the turmoil, one undeniable lesson emerged. Depending on a single buyer can be fatal. The crisis showed that energy sovereignty is not just a matter of technology or contracts, but of national strategy. Diversifying routes, expanding partnerships, and investing in value-added production are no longer options. They are vital necessities. And so the reflection remains. Will Azerbaijan transform this shock into a turning point towards strategic independence, or remain hostage to the decisions of greater powers? If you made it this far, subscribe to the channel, leave your comment, and share your perspective on this crisis that could redraw the Caspian energy map. Your engagement helps us continue delivering deep and independent analysis. Thank you for following until the end, and see you in the next report.